Disaster struck in Venezuela just 39 seconds apart. Two powerful earthquakes, nearly 2,300 people killed, tens of thousands still missing. Now the interim government, already grappling with political turmoil and a tanking economy, is struggling to respond.
Marico!
Shake, 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 shake.
Fallecido.
Ay, Dios mío, mi Dios.
Marico! Marico!
Someone has been found alive.
Claro, claro, claro.
Hola.
The most grotesque lottery.
¡Asómate en el balcón! ¡Christopher!
William, ¡qué mi niña, William! Y todavía falta más, William. William.
6 days after the earthquakes, the haunting echo of Venezuelans calling out to their trapped loved ones has quietened. There have been miracle rescues and moments of hope. An 11-year-old boy pulled from the rubble, a 9-month-old and her mother, an 18-month-old baby. But many families have had to resort to digging through debris by hand and begging for help. They say they've been abandoned by the authorities. Sky News correspondents Martha Kellner and James Matthews travelled to the epicenter of the disaster zone.
Sunsets over Caracas. It was around this time, early evening, that the earthquakes came.
¡Marico! ¡Mi mamá, huevón! ¡Mi mamá!
Buildings collapsed in the Venezuelan capital and beyond. A frantic search began for people trapped. There had been 2 earthquakes, 39 seconds apart. One measured a magnitude of 7.2, the other 7.5. It was the strongest quake to hit Venezuela in over a century.
2 fallecidos y vinimos.
2 dead, one searcher told us. They would find many more. We were the first international journalists to travel to the worst hit area, past the rescue traffic, to a place where the sun came up on a town's collapse. This is Katia Lamar. There was silence here, but in these scenes, the earthquakes resonated still. Katia Lamar is a seaside town in the state of La Guaira. Everybody, it seemed, had lost somebody.
Hola. ¿Me escucha?
There was the smell of death and sense of despair.
María.
¡Niña Eugenia! ¡Christopher!
They found the belongings of loved ones lost,
María.
and it ached.
Christopher. María.
Necesitamos máquina.
Machinery was the shout. They were begging for help because they were digging by hand. We met Anthony Oropesa at the gates of his apartment block. His wife and 3 children had been inside when the earthquakes hit.
Isabela, María Fernanda, mi esposa María José y mi hijo José Alejandro.
They were in the rubble behind him. And he'd spent the morning trying to summon help with heavy lifting, without success.
We've been trying many ways to talk to them, but we've had no response. But we know they're alive. They're here, and they're alive.
The scale of the challenge was plain to see at the hospital too. Patients were decanted onto the street because there was a fear of contamination from bodies inside. There were so many, some were laid out on the pavement. Here we found Maitali Zamora. Her husband lay dead nearby, and she was waiting for relatives to help remove his remains.
Estoy en la calle, pues. Ya con la pérdida de mi esposo, es otra.
I'm on the street now, and now without my husband, another problem. I don't wish this on anybody. From the bottom of my heart, I don't wish this on any country or state.
It was desperate in this town. This was the scene 2 days after the earthquakes, as looters descended on its centre, compounding the chaos. This is a scene being played out across this whole area. They have found somebody here dead. Local people who've spent the morning searching and shouting the names of their loved ones, well, they've gathered here to check who has been discovered. It is the most grotesque lottery. This was a search and rescue job for trained professionals, and they flew in from around the world. Some arrived complaining of obstruction and delays on entry caused by Venezuelan authorities. As time passed, so did the window of survival for anybody left alive under the rubble. And yet, hope didn't die.
Did you hear that someone was alive in there?
There may have been a possibility.
So everyone's moving now towards a site in the rubble where someone has been found alive. They're calling for an ambulance to be brought up here.
Up there. All right.
Sky's Martha Kellner joined a search in La Guaira.
Check that one.
By now, it was 3 days since the earthquakes. The talk was of looking for a miracle rescue. The miracle happened here. A boy aged 11 was pulled out alive.
Everyone must receive such a boost when they find a little boy alive in that wreckage, right?
Of course, of course. We all need this help, and we're all doing right. Working together with love, because the life human being is the most important thing that we can have.
There were others rescued too. 3 days after the quakes, this was a 9-month-old child pulled out along with her mother. And this was a woman found holding her baby, just 18 days old, who had survived alongside her. They were success stories, but they were rare, as Venezuela's confirmed death toll rose by the day, and tens of thousands remained missing. In Caracas, this is Avenue Luis Roche. At the bottom of the street, they dig in the rubble of a collapsed apartment block. At the top, they wait for news.
The pain is unimaginable, but we know we're not the only ones.
They are relatives and residents who escaped and who tell the survivors' tale.
The first earthquake threw me back like Michael Jackson, and I was like, what the hell? I shouted, "Run, run, the building is falling down." When I turned, I took 2 steps, the ceiling fell down, and the rush of air blew me out.
Here we met Gabriel Corredor. He had his helmet on because he'd been helping to look for his brother Uriel.
My brother is here in the hall, and he is strong.
We'd only just finished speaking to Gabriel when suddenly there was news. His brother was a friend too of Rosana Hernandez, and he'd been with her when the earthquakes hit. She was told the news, and then so was Gabriel. His brother had been found the day after the disaster. His remains had already been taken to the morgue. Here, it is hard holding on to it. Venezuela is a poor country. The communist regime of Hugo Chavez, then Nicolas Maduro, presided over years of economic decline. It was made worse by US sanctions. There has been a lack of proper investment, proper infrastructure, and that's contributed to the devastation caused and to the country's ability to deal with it, to meet the scale of response required. What happened here has left devastation in its wake. And it's raised questions about buildings unsuitable and a regime responsible. And there's anger at the government response to the disaster. It's a headline story on the national news here, and it's a story told on the ground.
The only hope we have is God alone, and God is not helping us. Please help us. Send this message to the world. Bring us the machines. We have more than 10,000 people who want to live. We have to get them out.
Anger compounds the grief here too. This is a makeshift morgue where the bereaved queue to identify and retrieve the remains of loved ones. But many can't afford to bury their dead. The undertaker's vehicles are queued up for collection, but only with payment of more than £300. It's a sum double the average monthly salary here.
How is it possible that we have nothing and they are charging us what they are to bury our loved ones, and we don't have the government's support? We're waiting for the family to pay for the undertaker to come. We don't have that kind of money. If we did, we would have paid already.
Wherever you go in Venezuela, you see the signs and the structure of a repressive regime. This country for so long has been in the grip of dictatorship, with a dark record of human rights abuse, a crackdown on political dissent, government critics thrown in jail, forced into exile, tortured, disappeared. A recent study for the United Nations found that despite the fact that Nicolas Maduro has been captured and taken to America, there remains in place the apparatus of a repressive regime, and it remains operational. You look around and you see police and military personnel, armed and conspicuous.
No, claro.
There are regular checkpoints and military traffic. It doesn't look or feel like freedom. The spectre of Maduro still looms large. His officials are still in charge, and it impacts earthquake relief. Aid organizations complain of restricted access. Locals say there's been an inadequate response. Delcy Rodriguez is Maduro's former deputy, now acting president. She was jeered when she surveyed rescue efforts in Caracas. We spoke to the local mayor by her side. Is it the fault of the government for poor building, poor infrastructure? poor investment?
No, because the buildings fall is very old, more of 15 years. And now we have new legal to construir los edificios. O sea, tenemos una nueva legislación que obliga a los edificios sean antisísmicos.
We have new legislation now. Now we have new legislation, but these two buildings were too old for that legislation.
This place, La Guaira, is tied up in the recent politics of Venezuela. The US military used this as a route in January when they flew to capture Nicolas Maduro, the former leader. He's now in a New York cell awaiting trial. Donald Trump has a control over the administration in his place. He has access to the country's oil. Part of the political story here is what does Venezuela get from the United States in this, its time of desperate need? The USS Fort Lauderdale is anchored at Caracas, supporting American search and rescue personnel sent here with a social media profile. The American government has committed several $100 million through aid agencies and the United Nations.
USA.
There's a sanctions exemption for transactions related to the relief effort.
El cuerpo y la sangre de nuestro Señor Jesucristo nos guarde hasta la vida eterna.
In a country over 90% Catholic, we attended Sunday Mass in downtown Caracas, held outside because of damage to the church. Afterwards, we talked Trump and the politics of disaster. Is this a test of Donald Trump?
People in Venezuela in general expect more from Trump than from Rodriguez, you know? And then this situation right now, people can say, oh, this is fault from Trump too, you know? Because he is doing nothing about. Okay, they send troops, they say engineers, but they didn't came the same Wednesday. And in that situation, 1 minute, you know, 1 hour is important for your life.
Pero la verdad que no hemos oído respuesta de nada.
We've not had any response at all. Nothing. Everything has come from foreigners. That's all we have. That's all that gives us comfort.
Porque también tenemos un problema en nuestro país, que esto no sirve.
We have a problem in our country. This system does not work. Politically, it doesn't work. Everything's been taken. Everything is repression. Everything is the persecution of people. And this regime has to change.
This is a country with long-term challenges, politically, economically, and they feed into its immediate crisis. It is felt acutely here, not least by the thousands displaced and dispossessed. In Caracas, they are housed in shelters, in sports centres and in city parks. The trauma here is generational.
Everything was shaking like this, very hard, and all of our cooking pots fell down. We ran up and everyone went outside. About the building, I told them that it fell down because it was too old, but they're gonna make a new one. I said, we'll sleep under the stars tonight. We are on an adventure. So for them, this is the best day of their lives.
They have known catastrophe here before. In the state of La Guaira, there were mudslides in 1999 that killed 10% of its population. Now they are organizing coffins for the victims of the earthquakes. In a place already defined by disaster, they are living it once more.
Well, later in the program, we're going to hear more from James in Caracas. But first, let's go to Martha Kellner, also in the Venezuelan capital for us tonight. Martha, there is a palpable sense of anger over how the government have handled the emergency response.
Yeah, I'm in Park del Este, which is I'm in Park del Este, which is in the centre of Caracas, one of the main parks here, and this is where a lot of the people displaced by the earthquake have ended up, a makeshift shelter which is being guarded by the Venezuelan security forces. But yeah, as you say, a huge amount of anger at the Venezuelan government about how they have handled the response to the disaster. I've spent every day, almost for the past week, in La Guaira, the worst affected area, where people have been digging with their bare hands, with shovels, wearing bike helmets to try and retrieve the bodies of their own relatives. And they're just furious, really, at the what they think is the inaction from the Venezuelan authorities. I was speaking to one lady yesterday who is searching for her sister and her two nephews. She was not in La Guaira when the earthquake happened. It happened 6 p.m. Wednesday. She said she eventually got there 5 a.m. Thursday morning to find nobody. She said it was a ghost town. She said there were a smattering of families waiting for news, but no sign of the authorities. People desperate for machinery. One thing that I found very interesting is that when the machinery does get in, these huge, great hulking diggers, sometimes they're not working because they're out of fuel. Imagine that in the most oil-rich country in the world. There is no fuel to operate this vital machinery, and that is making people very angry indeed. Of course, we have now seen the international search and rescue teams moving in, and local people very grateful to see them. But yeah, in a country where it's difficult to criticise the authorities, unusual to see people speaking out so strongly against the Venezuelan government.
Absolutely. Martha Kellner in Caracas. Martha, thank you. Well, analysis of satellite imagery suggests nearly 59,000 buildings were damaged or destroyed, many of them along a particular stretch of coast in the state of La Guaira. Our international correspondent Alex Rossi has the details.
The scale of destruction caused by the earthquakes that hit Venezuela last week is hard to comprehend. But Sky News data and forensics team has been mapping the damage to assess its impact. Footage like this, shot from helicopter at sunrise the day after the earthquake, shows the complete flattening of mostly residential areas. This is the Residencia Oasis Beach, a multi-storey apartment block. Now, a year ago, it looked like this. Now, less than 100 metres down the road, we see two other buildings completely flattened. Our analysis suggests these were each 8 or 9 stories tall. But one of the tallest buildings in the area is the El Jurel apartment block. Though not flattened, it's been completely destroyed. That footage was filmed from the skies above Playa Grande, one of the worst affected areas. The recording lasts for 4 minutes and 57 seconds. And in that time, we see the helicopter fly for 6.8 kilometers around the town. It's only a snapshot, but it gives you an idea of the extent of the devastation. According to analysis of satellite imagery from Oregon State University researchers, 58,870 buildings are estimated to have been damaged or destroyed. Around half of those are in areas along a roughly 51-kilometer stretch of the coast in La Guaira State. On one 1-kilometer stretch of road in Carabadea, east of where the helicopter flew, Sky News has confirmed at least 13 large buildings have completely collapsed. 10 of these were high-rise residential blocks, like this one, Residencias Aura. This was a 7-story building consisting of small apartments. We can see what it looked like before and how the earthquake has caused it to collapse. Many of the buildings we've analysed have fallen in a similar way. They've fallen vertically, straight down. Have a look at this. It's the Petunia building in Caracas. This is what experts call pancaking, an incredibly deadly form of structural failure that happens when the vertical structures that support a building's weight, primarily its columns, fail. But not all the buildings have fallen this way. This is a satellite image of the Hugo Chavez housing development in Playa Grande in May this year. This is it on June the 25th. We can see many buildings have collapsed. with many falling to the side. We've counted 280 buildings in this housing complex, and the floor plans of the apartment block show that each building had 16 two-bedroom apartments. This is a social housing complex commissioned by former President Hugo Chavez in 2011. Another social housing development to the east was also flattened in the earthquake in an area called Los Cocos. Satellite images show 8 of the towers now gone. In the city of Caracas, destroyed buildings are less frequent, but many that collapsed were as high as 21 stories, housing thousands of people. In an online platform registering missing people, there are more than 40,000 people unaccounted for. These are just some of the faces of the missing. And as time goes by, any hope that they are still alive is fast fading.
The United Nations has said it's preparing for up to 10,000 deaths. The scale of tragedy means tens of thousands of people are homeless. Multiple aid agencies are on the ground trying to help, and several countries have sent supplies and rescue teams. I spoke to the UN Humanitarian Chief, Tom Fletcher, about the emergency response.
So we've got 56 search and rescue teams out there at the moment going through the rubble. And it's an extraordinary mobilization of international support. These are teams that we've trained up, that we've accredited, and we're coordinating now as they try that desperate, desperate hunt for any survivors who are left. But we're heading to almost 2,000 dead now, and of course many more injured and many who've lost everything.
Yeah, but I mean, the 2,000 confirmed killed, but I think the number of people missing or unaccounted for, 43,000. Do you think we're just starting to see the start of this crisis?
I fear so. I fear those numbers will go further up. For us, we're spurred on by, the sound of voices we can still hear. The people that we still believe that we can reach. But the awful, awful tragedy of this moment is that the voices start to go silent. And then the operation has to pivot to huge amounts of medical support, to shelter. We've got to get lots of prefabs and tents out there so that tens of thousands of people can get into some kind of accommodation. And then we have to start to rebuild the essential infrastructure, particularly the health infrastructure.
Because you'd said that actually 8 million people in Venezuela already needed aid. So this is a terrible disaster, but it's come on top of that. So how much more difficult does it make your job?
It makes it much more difficult. And of course, we've had very heavy rains as well. So you're getting mudslides. It's making it even harder for the search and rescue teams. But most importantly, it's making it much, much harder for the survivors, for the civilians that we need to reach. And that is on top of 8 million people already in the direst need. And our campaigns for them, our work for them was massively underfunded. We faced these huge cuts over the last few years. And Venezuela is one of those places where we're just unable to reach the people that we need to reach.
I mean, there's been a lot of anger about the initial response. We've had correspondents on the ground, and they've been speaking to the victims or people trying to get their loved ones out of the rubble, saying that the government was just nowhere to be found for a very long time. So a lot of anger. And this crisis has come, it's not just geological crisis, on top of a geopolitical situation that's terrible for Venezuela. Country under sanctions for years. President Maduro was captured by the US, an interim government. How does all of that impact, not just on the work that you're trying to do, but the way that the earthquake has impacted the population?
So it's the nature of our humanitarian work that we can operate very independently. And so we're able to put all the politics to one side. An extraordinary thing about these search and rescue teams we've mobilized is they come from every corner of the world, including from countries that don't agree on much and are often in conflict themselves. So that part of it is we're able to insulate that from the wider kind of transactional geopolitical moment that we're in. But you're right, of course, the fact that the world is pulling apart in this way makes international action that much more difficult. The fact that Venezuela is in the middle now of serious political change and uncertainty makes it much, much harder as well. But look, any government in the world would have found this a huge, huge crisis to deal with. And from the very, very beginning, we've been in very close touch with the acting president. I've been in contact with her myself to make sure that we've got the coordination right with the local authorities. And ultimately, it's the local authorities who are doing the most important work on the front lines of this effort.
And it is often the local authorities that are being criticised. So in light of that, are you happy with the way the coordination is going and has gone?
We've got a very active coordination cell with the local authorities. As I say, I'm in very, very close contact with the acting president, so is my humanitarian coordinator. So we are happy that we've got that really good channel of communication. But at the same time, it's understandable that people are anxious and afraid and frustrated that between us we're not able to do more. I can completely understand that.
Tom Fletcher, the UN's aid chief, speaking to me today. Well, let's bring in James Matthews now. James, the United States are playing a key role in the emergency response, but the Venezuelan government has also been destabilized by the US intervention, hasn't it?
That's right, Barbara. Yeah, Donald Trump has made himself a player in Venezuela, the puppet master pulling the strings from a distance. He has a control over the political direction of Venezuela. He removed Nicolas Maduro, yes, but he's very much aligned himself with the rump of the Maduro regime. Stability is at the heart of Donald Trump's grand plan for this place, but stability has to be threatened by the kind of anger, the frustration we have seen on the streets at the handling of this crisis by Venezuela's government. Ostensibly, this is a country on a path towards democracy, free and fair elections. That's the promise of the United States. But the population is one that is finding its voice, and we hear public dissent in a way that we haven't before in Venezuela. But you know, Barbara, to look around, you still see the military checkpoints, the soldiers on the streets, the guys with the guns. There is still the military infrastructure reminiscent of the Chavista regime, big portraits of Nicolas Maduro and so on. Actually, that reminds me of Saddam's Iraq, Colonel Gaddafi's Libya. There are vested interests in this country that want to pull it back from change. So the more anger at the government's response to this disaster, then the more uncertainty about the political direction of this country, and the more doubts there will be around the promises of Donald Trump.
James Matthews in Caracas for us. James, thank you. Well, this was Venezuela's worst earthquake in more than a century, and that is reflected in the data. At least 2,295 people killed. The United Nations is preparing 10,000 body bags. More than 40,000 people are still missing, and 59,000 buildings have been destroyed or damaged, even as ordinary Venezuelans say they have been left to fend for themselves inside the disaster zone.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect.
Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking,
thank you so much,
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
One of the issues that we're hearing again and again from Venezuelans is their frustration that the government is not doing enough to help them. I got the thoughts of Stalin Gonzalez, a deputy in the Venezuelan National Assembly and member of the opposition party Un Nuevo Tiempo.
Sí, bueno, primero dar las gracias por el
Well, it's a week now since the earthquake, which nobody made any plans for at all. There was no planning at all. The response essentially came from the people who have really made a heroic effort to help. I think it has shown that the government has not been prepared and just doesn't have enough tools to confront this situation. It's been left up to the civilians and the firefighters to deal with it.
So that lack of preparedness and that lack of equipment that you've just mentioned, what impact do you think, insofar as you can assess it now, what impact would that have had on the ground, on the communities that were impacted by the earthquakes?
Well, you know, I went down to La Guaira and spent part of the day, the first day there. The impact was absolutely huge. The images which you get in the media simply don't reflect the horror of it all, the reality. I think nobody was prepared. The impact was really shouldered by the volunteers, by the firefighters and civil defense and international assistance. The government simply wasn't prepared. It was down to the people.
Our correspondents on the ground spoke to many people who said they had been completely abandoned by the authorities. They were left on their own, literally trying to dig their loved ones out of the rubble, and this within the window of 72 hours, which is crucial if people are to come out alive effectively. Are those communities right? Were they abandoned by the government?
Well, you know, it depends on the place where it actually struck. I certainly think that in the worst hit areas, they were very slow to arrive. The point is that the earthquake was really much bigger than it actually seems, and it was essentially down in the first hours to the goodwill of the people there.
So who is to blame for what you've called that lack of capacity?
Well, I think it's clear that it's the same government which is now in place. The main effort was put in by the volunteers, the firefighters, civil defense and international assistance. I mean, the US and the Mexicans, I think, really came fully equipped, and it showed that we were not equipped, and that's been going on for some years now.
But Dulce Rodriguez is now the interim president. Ultimately, does the responsibility stop with her?
Well, you know, Dulce Rodriguez has been in power for much of that time, for a very long time, for many years. But I must insist at this point that the government is not to blame for the earthquake, which after all is a natural phenomenon. But I think it does show quite clearly that they weren't prepared.
You are criticizing the government strongly, but you are yourself a deputy in the Venezuelan National Assembly, a member of an opposition party. What are you doing to try to redress some of the mistakes and the wrongs that you accuse the government of?
Well, you know, it's the role of the opposition, after all, to criticize the government. There's nothing wrong in that. For what's happening and for not having had the sufficient tools, or not making sure that they had the sufficient tools to deal with the natural disaster. And that goes back to not having taken the right decisions or not taking any decisions about it in the previous years. But, you know, the opposition is certainly expressing its solidarity with the volunteers to help. And we will be putting forward proposals for laws to alleviate the situation in the long term.
You are receiving assistance from right around the world, and by far the biggest donor has been the United States. As well as money, they've deployed 900 military personnel on Venezuela itself. I'm just wondering what your reaction is to this action by the U.S., and if you worry that the U.S. might use it to extend its influence in Venezuela in the future.
Well, yes, you know, we are very grateful to the immense amount of international aid which is coming in and the solidarity which has been expressed. And it's evident that the US obviously is helping a great deal, as you said, not only in money, but in personnel and resources. We'll just have to wait and see what that gives in the medium term and the long term. But I think, yes, it is a cause for some concern. We'll just have to see how that develops.
It's opposition politician Stalin Gonzalez speaking to me a little earlier. Well, I want to go back now to my conversation with the UN's humanitarian chief. Tom Fletcher believes any government would have found it challenging to respond to a disaster of this magnitude. Let's have a listen.
I think 2 earthquakes on this scale in a built-up area like this were always going to present massive, massive challenges for everyone. And the key thing now in this phase is that we keep that attention as we move beyond, I'm afraid, that initial search and rescue phase and move into then the support to the survivors, those who are injured, those who are displaced, those needing shelter and food and medicine and water, that we pull together as one international community, as one UN family, one humanitarian family, and we just make sure we can save as many lives as we can.
You said rightly that, of course, that you try to keep your job as coordinator as separate from politics as you possibly can. Interestingly, one of the biggest, I think the biggest responder, actually, as a country, has been the United States. Now, as I mentioned, you know, the President Maduro was captured just a few months ago, now facing charges. That's why there is an interim president now in Dulce Rodriguez. Having such a big American presence there, does that have an impact on what you do on the coordination? Do you coordinate them as well, or are they doing their own thing? Is it possible to separate the politics from the work you do?
Well, we're seeing a big, visible US reaction, US engagement to this. And I've been in touch with them, from the first hour as well. I think it was my second call on getting the news was to the State Department. They provided 100 million to our UN recovery efforts. They provided 2 of those search and rescue teams, which are being coordinated by the UN at the moment. So they're an essential player in this emergency response. But it has to be a global emergency response. It's too big a job for any one country to take on alone. And it's important that we do have that breadth of engagement to ensure that it's a genuinely global, neutral, impartial response.
What are the immediate demands now, and what do you see the long-term ones being?
So we're in that final phase of the search and rescue, and I'm aware of how challenging that will sound to people who are still looking for desperately hoping for a miracle, as we are, and we won't give up on those last remaining miracles. But then there comes a point when we then have to push more resources to the support to the survivors. Medicine and public health right now is a huge challenge. Food and water, we're moving a lot of our food stocks from our depots in Panama and around the region to support survivors. 4 million kids are in the areas affected, so there's a lot of work with them to make sure they're getting back into some form of education, that they're in shelter. And then some form of housing and shelter, hugely important in this strip of land that's been most badly affected. And that will be a combination of tents, bringing in lots of tents, but also we're looking at these more semi-permanent, the prefab structures that can give people a bit more protection from the elements.
We were just talking before the interview about how there's so many crises around the world, Sudan, Gaza, just to name two, and here's another one that's going to need a lot of long-term support. Are you confident that you're going to get that kind of funding, or do you think that going forward it will depend on some of the main responders, main donors, like, for example, the US?
So at the moment, I'm not confident that we're getting the funding that we need. We've faced these enormous cuts across the humanitarian system over the last 2 years. This year, I'm appealing for $23 billion for the most urgent life-saving priorities. We're aiming to save 87 million lives this year. That's more people than died in the Second World War. And 23 billion sounds like a lot of money, but it's 1%, less than 1% of what the world is spending on guns, arms, defense this year. So we're not asking people to choose between defending themselves and helping the world's poorest, or building a hospital in London or a hospital in Kandahar. It's a tiny fraction of what we spend on other priorities. But at the moment, the money's not coming. I've got about just over 10 billion in so far of that 23 billion. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for every pledge, every donation we get, but it's a drop in the ocean of what's really needed in the world right now.
You're watching The World with me, Barbara Serra. Coming up next, we're going to hear from the Disasters Emergency Committee as they launch their emergency appeal.
Liberation Day.
By popular demand,
Wow.
here we are.
Donald Trump. It is quite the story. Wherever it goes, on Trump 100, we go with it.
Can you tell us who you're looking for?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
Are you overstating the reach and significance of this deal?
Not like you said it.
From the UK.
Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
It was 10 feet from it, and all of a sudden the shots rang out.
People impacted.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Join us wherever you get your podcast.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
An enormous explosion that's just come down. I think it was a monster that's just landed in between us.
Hundreds and hundreds of people hoping to get north, ultimately to get to the United States.
It's a border where they're not welcome, yet they keep coming.
We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people, taking them out, and putting them into trucks and taking them away.
They make about 50 kilos of fentanyl a week. It's incredibly dangerous and toxic stuff.
There's been an upsurge in deaths. The fighting between the gangs is getting more and more vicious. Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there. This is much more like a normal town. It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change. We've been crushed. Free from wherever you get your news. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine. The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world. Sky News, the full story first.
Well, hundreds of thousands of people have been using the beast for years to traverse Mexico, but it is really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
As you've been hearing, the scale of this tragedy has left hundreds of thousands of people without shelter, clean water, or medical supplies. An appeal has now been launched by the Disasters Emergency Committee, that's a coalition of UK charities.
So I've been speaking to colleagues in the region, and many of those aid workers, we have to remember, have been impacted themselves with their homes damaged or destroyed, and some even worrying about their own loved ones. But the emergency needs are, as they've relayed to me, are the emergency clean, safe drinking water. There's a huge risk without access to clean drinking water that disease will spread. And then that's followed by medical care, medical attention. People have been injured, and there are people with pre-existing medical conditions that continue to need support, and the hospitals are just completely overstretched at the moment. And finally, it's emergency shelter. People have lost homes, or their homes have been damaged, and they don't feel that it's safe enough for them to return to. So these are the emergency things that we're supporting with. And as time goes by, it's clear that people also need food, psychosocial support. Many of our members are already providing that on the ground, and they're providing, for example, child-friendly spaces and support to the elderly. When an emergency of a huge scale impacts so many people and the needs are immense and warrants an international response, this is when the DEC is able to activate an appeal in partnership with its broadcast partners, which includes Sky News and Sky TV. So today we've launched the DEC Venezuela Earthquake Appeal precisely to raise as much funds as possible so that we can equip our colleagues and local partners in Venezuela to reach as many people in Venezuela as possible with life-saving aid, whether that be the sort of medical urgent aid they need, access to clean, safe drinking water, and emergency shelter. So that's why we've launched the appeal, and we're urging the public to donate as generously as possible so that we can reach as many people as possible.
And we'll leave you this evening with that appeal.
Two violent earthquakes within seconds of each other have torn lives and families apart in Venezuela. The scale of destruction is staggering. Countless lives already lost. Tens of thousands of people reported missing. Homes that once provided security and shelter left in ruins. Whole communities left devastated, with nowhere to turn.
Un desespero, quisiera saber dónde está mi niño, si está ahí atrapado, o está por ahí un refugio. Es verdad, estoy desesperada.
As search and recovery efforts continue, the priority now is to provide urgent help for those who survived. In the darkest moments of their lives, we can show them they are not alone. Even those who've been brought out of the rubble face an uncertain future. Millions of Venezuelans have been affected. Thousands have been injured. And so many more have been left without shelter, food, clean water, or medical supplies.
No han llegado demasiados pacientes, muchos sin familia, sin hogares, personas que no tienen absolutamente nada, que quedaron en nada. Vienen solamente con lo que llevan puesto y ya.
An economic crisis in Venezuela had already left nearly 8 million people struggling to meet their most basic needs. The situation now is critical. DEC charities and their local partners are already on the ground, working around the clock to reach those most vulnerable. But they need our support. You can donate online at dec.org.uk by calling 0370 60 60 900, by texting SKY to 70150 to give £10, or by sending a cheque to this address. Just £10 could provide essential hygiene supplies to a family to prevent illness. £50 could help provide emergency food support to 2 families for a week. And £100 could provide shelter kits for 6 families whose homes have been destroyed. It's hard to watch and not feel hopeless. But we can make a difference. Whatever you can spare can save lives. So please, donate now.
We're trying to see as much as we can. We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting. The whole neighborhood is rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan. I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming. It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.